What's happening now when they're actually freezing assets of Russians? Who is going to now keep assets in dollars? Nobody, not central banks. This is a high risk.
Pointed out before that Russia could indeed sell oil to China for either won, perhaps even gold. And should Russia sell oil in either of those or anything other than US dollars, what is the impact for the US dollar going to be?
Well, Russia is in the wonderful situation that on the one hand, uh, major parts of Europe are totally dependent on their energy and also on their food. Um, and on the other hand, they have a friend in the East that happily takes their food and energy also, which is China, as you said. So they actually, so what the US and the rest of the world didn't realize is that this is how Russia is sitting in a very strong position. Of course, their economy will suffer, because everybody's economy will suffer. And of course, we all want the war to be stopped. But in the meantime, Russia has choices, and what the U.S. has done. I mean, the U.S. has dictated the monetary and policy for the world for quite a long time now. And of course, we had a few years ago we had FATCA, which basically means that anything paid in dollars will be reported to the U.S. and controlled by the U.S. And now, what's happening now when they're actually freezing assets of Russians, telling central banks to freeze, not just of the Russian government, but of individuals. Who is going to now keep assets in dollars, for example?
Mm.
Nobody, not central banks, not individuals. I mean, we wouldn't, and we'll tell our clients, don't keep any money in dollars. It's a high risk, because the thing is that the US is still in a position to use this weapon, and the world is still listening to the US. But the US, as I've pointed out in many articles, is a bankrupt nation, of course. They've been running deficits since 1930. I mean, they're just in 71. I mean, the debt is up 60 times, and GDP is up just over 20 times. So they're printing more and more money to survive, and that bubble, as I pointed out many times, and as we have discussed, you and I, Patrick, that bubble is now in the process of bursting, and that means also bursting, obviously, bursting of the U.S. economy, and all the inflated assets, but also bursting of the dollar. And as we know, I mean, the dollar is already down 98% since 1971, when the gold window was closed. So the next fall now to zero is going to happen, and there's only 2% left, but that 2% is 100% from here, and that's going to happen, and dollar is going to collapse. Nobody will want dollars, of course, to be. Every country now, Saudi Arabia talking about trading now with China and yuan, for example, and everybody's going to go away from the dollar. Nobody will want to touch the dollar. So from having been the currency that everybody wanted to hold in the world, and everybody just, wherever you went, it was dollars. But it's going to be the opposite. Nobody will want dollars. The problem is, of course, there is no currency to take over from the dollar. There's no one single currency that will become a global currency for quite a while, at least. So there'll be lots of different currencies. So there'll be the yuan, it'll be the euro, it'll be the pound, etc. And maybe, especially now since Russia is already linking the ruble to gold, maybe gold will also play a much more important role.
That's another great point because it's been said that trade wars turn into currency wars eventually turn into hot wars, and we're kind of seeing the trade wars and currency wars and on the fringe of a hot war. Is, let's say, the backing of national currencies with gold perhaps an answer to bringing in trust in a currency that then leads into trust in trade to perhaps squash what's going on?
Yes, I've never been in favor of having totally 100% gold-backed currencies, linking like the Russians are doing now. So you can trade, linking it to the ruble is fine. It's not actually total gold backing. But the problem is if governments, if you start now with currencies being 100% gold backed, then government will start manipulating it again in a different way. I don't like governments controlling gold. I prefer what we call free gold, i.e., a gold that is actually not controlled by anyone, and that the market determines the price of gold. That's of course not the case at all now. But I think that what we're seeing now with the Russian actions, and as a linking it to the ruble, that will eventually mean that the demand for gold will increase, and it will destroy the futures markets in gold. And they have been manipulated for such a long time, and they need to be destroyed. That's the only way we can get free gold moving without massive manipulation by well, ultimately it is really the BIS through the central banks and the bullion banks. So I think that's where when we get that move and the failure of these futures market, which I've been saying will happen for quite a while, and it's taking longer than all of us could have ever imagined. But it will happen. You can't have a real money being backed by several hundred times of paper gold, and that's what that's what's happening at these futures exchanges. So, and of course, when that bursts, combined with a demand for real physical gold, and then those futures markets are going to collapse so quickly that no one can imagine. And of course, now with Alistair MacLeod has written about gold held by Russia and China could be a lot greater than we all expect, and I think that's the case too. What I've read and understood and studied is that China certainly has more than a couple of thousand tons of gold. They probably, Alistair says, 20,000 tons. And if you read back historically what they have, what they have actually collected, and especially of their own gold, of course, they're the biggest producer in the world, and they don't export anything. And they have gold historically also. So I wouldn't be surprised if China has 20,000, and whether Russia has the 12,000 that Alistair says could be the case, But they combined, I'm sure that they have much more than the U.S., which clearly doesn't have its 8,000 tons at all that it declares, or certainly not in an unencumbered form. It's probably been leased out and they'll never get it back. So that's why the power will also shift, and it's interesting. We kind of get to this gold era now, even if there isn't, as you said, even if there isn't full gold backing of currencies, but gold will be, that's where the power will lie now. Because you can see that Russia says, okay, if you want to buy, you can buy it in rubles or you can buy it in gold. You're not going to buy it in paper money that you're just printing. We're not going to take that. So it's from that point of view, and helping people to preserve wealth by buying and storing gold in itself. Buying and storing gold is a simple exercise, but the complexity of this is actually trying to predict what's going to happen and understand what forces are going to affect this, and therefore also helping people to move in the right direction. And I think we will. That was going to be an interesting game now in the future to predict what is going to happen to currencies, to countries, etc. Because there'll be a massive shift, but that shift was always clear. Commodities have been too cheap for too long and oversold. That's commodities in general. And of course, this inflation or hyperinflation that we expect, that's going to come through commodities primarily. It's not going to come in property or in stock markets or in bond markets, because they're already in bubbles. So they will deflate relatively. Whilst the commodity side, that's where we're going to see the real food, energy. and we're seeing it already, and that's going to go up dramatically in all of these things, which will be a disaster for the world. And because already, there are shortages. I think already before Christmas, the UN Food Agency was saying that there are already massive shortages in food before this happened.
Right,
So
right, true.
so that will lead to famine, that will lead to problems. And it'll be a very difficult time for the world ahead. But we will continue to try to navigate and tell people at least what they can do and how they can protect themselves. But everybody can't, of course. Most people in the world are poor, so they won't be able to protect themselves, and there will be misery. There's no question about it.